The Oregon faithful are certainly feeling some pain right now. And there are some narratives floating out there about this Ducks program. But my message to the Oregon Ducks fan base is crystal clear. Your squad? Yeah, they ain't going nowhere.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Let's say the quiet part out loud. You know, whether you are an Oregon Ducks fan or whether you've been watching this channel, listening to this podcast as not a fan of that squad from Eugene, you've probably noticed the Oregon Ducks faithful and myself, we have certainly made a connection this season. Now, being as good as they are, that certainly helps, but I want to make this crystal clear right out of the gate. Because Oregon entered that Rose Bowl at 13-0, Big Ten champions, they had certainly accomplished a lot. And now you see a lot of narratives and you see a lot of people, well, here they are again. Oregon comes up in the postseason with a lot of success and a lot of the momentum, and they fall short yet again, and they're throwing a lot of narratives and kind of the same narratives that have been thrown out there about the Oregon Ducks. I want to make sure I say this. Everything that I have said about the Oregon Ducks this season, I certainly don't take back. Right? This is not a situation where I am jumping off the ship at this point in time right now. I still think that the Oregon Ducks are the coolest program in all of college football. I still think Oregon and Ohio State were the two best teams, were the two most talented teams at this point in time. Oregon just wasn't ready to play in Pasadena on New Year's Day. Plain and simple, and Ohio State is on an absolute legendary heater right now. My message to the Oregon Ducks fan base is very simple. Even despite this loss, even despite how you may be feeling right now, this program, they ain't going anywhere. This is not a plateau. This is still a climbing program. Oregon will break through. Is it going to happen next year? Who knows? Is it going to happen 3 years from now? Who knows? It might not. It might not happen 5 years from now. But all of the ingredients are there for Oregon to get it done. It would be very surprising if they don't get it done in a 3 to 5 year period. I will certainly say that. And if you look at the near future, 2025 indicates that this is a program that's most likely going to have more of these opportunities. This is a program that is going to have opportunities to be in these types of situations, whether it's a 12-team playoff, whether it's a 14-team college football playoff, whether it's 5+7, 5+9, seeding, 4-4-2-1-1, whatever the format is going to be, the Oregon Ducks are going to be there. Because the way that they've been able to come in year one and what Dan Lanning has solidified around this program and what they look like from the inside out, this is a program that has solidified themselves in that top group in the Big Ten with the Ohio States, with the Penn States. Michigan is probably going to climb back up into that top group. I think after those teams, you can certainly draw a fairly bold line. And we know when it comes to the college football playoff, those top 3 teams, those top 4 teams, those are teams in the Big Ten that are going to be perennially competing for a national championship, and I certainly think Oregon is in that spot. The 2025 schedule does not have Ohio State, they do not have Michigan, and they get a team like Indiana at Autzen Stadium as well. All right, let's talk about 3 main points why I do believe that Oregon is not going anywhere as it pertains to them being like a top 5 program, a top 6 program, a top 7 program in all of college football. I think the main reason why I still believe this is because Dan Lanning's Oregon is still growing. It's still growing. You might think after this season, I talked about with some Oregon people on this very channel, it says, hey, this might be the best Oregon team of all time. And then you look at what they accomplished. It's insane to say, yeah, Dan Lanning and this program is still climbing the ladder. Dan Lanning is 38 years old, and he just completed his 3rd year ever as a head coach Dan Lanning is still learning. I know we look at him in his interviews and he says all the right things. We look at him in the Ducks versus them behind the scenes, and man, he looks like he's doing everything great in the lead up and the preparation to seasons, and then in a week by week basis, and be like, man, that Dan Lanning, he's got it figured out. But folks, he's still learning, which is a little bit of a scary thought, certainly right now. And this is a program that continues to build and improve on things year after year after year in the Dan Lanning era. 10 wins in 2022, 12 wins in 2023, and you've got 13 wins in 2024. Of course, the big jump and accomplishment that happened, or I should say one of the big jumps and accomplishments that happened this year was righting the wrongs against your rivals, right? You know, you look at that first year, he lost to Oregon State and he lost to Washington. Last season, he did right the wrong against the Beavers, getting that win in Jonathan Smith's final game as head coach at Oregon State, but he lost to Washington not once, but twice this year. Yes, I know Oregon State very down, really bouncing down to the group of six level, so that's maybe not a big hill that we should maybe give this Oregon team a ton of credit for, certainly. Washington, of course, was having a down year after all of they lost, but hey, you'll certainly take it where you can get it. This is an Oregon program that is staying at the top when maybe their rivals are kind of headed down into the valley here at some points in times as well. And then you look at this year. You look at 2024. Okay, we talked about not beating your rivals. He did what he needed to do as far as that narrative is concerned. Not being able to win big games. October 12th, he beat Ohio State. Big Ten championship game. He was able to beat Penn State. This is the first team in Big Ten history to beat Ohio State, to beat Michigan State, to beat Penn State, all in the same season. This was a historic first year in the Big Ten for the Oregon Ducks, and of course for Dan Lanning leading this program right now. He's 35-6 as a head coach, and he's still growing. And he's still learning. To put it into perspective, Kirby Smart at Georgia, we give him and that program so much benefit for the doubt. Yeah, they're going to win this many games. They're going to win the SEC once they get to the playoffs. Certainly didn't pan out for them this year, but we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt right now. Well, they're Georgia. They're up here. It took him 6 years to win a national championship. He made one 4-team college football playoff in his first 5 years as a head coach. Folks, these things take time. Georgia was in a similar-ish kind of position that the Oregon Ducks have been and maybe are in right now, where they were that team in the SEC where they got close. If you've watched SEC shorts, right, you see the Georgia relationship with Hope. They've had Hope so many times over the years, and then it kind of comes crashing down in the end for that Bulldogs program. But now Georgia has certainly elevated them championships later, that they are one of the premier programs in all of college football. And it wasn't really that way before Kirby Smart took over. Oregon certainly kind of floating in that same boat. They have been, and they're kind of floating there certainly right now. Dan Lanning's culture is still in its infancy. I think it takes 5+ years, maybe 4+, but however, every situation is different, to be able to build an elite championship level culture. Kind of like the Georgia example that I just talked about. Oregon had a really good culture, but a really good top 10 culture is a whole lot different than a top 2 or 3 elite championship level culture. And that's the jump that Dan Lanning is trying to make with the Oregon Ducks right now. And when you're making that jump and you're early in your tenure, you're going to take lumps, a lot like you did against the super team that was the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl on January 1st as well. Like his first recruiting class, the 2023 recruiting class, they are true sophomores right now. These kids are babies. by their age, maybe not necessarily their toughness. This was a pretty tough team for most of the year, certainly. Like Mateo Uyunglele was a part of that first class, and he had 10.5 sacks. It was second in the Big Ten. He was one of the best disruptors in the Big Ten Conference this season. How about Kenyon Sadiq coming from that class? Took a major jump this year, and he's slated to be one of the best tight ends in the Big Ten next season. Iapani Lalaolu, Pancho, in there at center. He anchored a really good offensive line. And then you look at the transfers from that class as well. Jordan Birch, you look what he was able to do as an all-conference performer. You look at Tez Johnson, what he was able to do. Trayshawn Holden certainly being one of the top receivers on this team. Kyrie Jackson, God rest his soul, was a first team all Pac-12 type of performer and a really good draft pick as well. And these guys are all going to be very good draft picks. There's been narratives out there that says, well, Oregon, yeah, they can get all of these great recruiting classes. They can get all of these great players, but they can't develop. Folks, we are barely into this thing. We are barely into this thing with Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks, and he's already proven that he can take players and develop them into NFL type of guys. Let's stick on the subject that is players, because to take your program to that elite national championship type of level, you need to recruit elite high school talent. Transfer portal, if you live in the portal, you're not going to get to that level. Plain and simple, that's the fact of the matter. And building elite teams is about recruiting at an elite level, and we know that the Oregon Ducks have been able to do that. That's why I'm confident that this team is going to break through, because when you stockpile class after class after class, yeah, sure, not everybody's going to stay around. Kids are going to hit the portal. But when you have that depth and that depth of talent, that's when the cream really rises to the top. And as I mentioned, these classes that he's been able to bring in, these players, they're still very young. He's had to plug holes with transfer portal guys, and the ceilings of those guys will not be as high as the ceilings of these guys right now. How do you recruit at an elite level? In today's day and age, name, image, and likeness, and now we're about to enter a rev share era. It's about resources. Whether you love that about Oregon or whether you hate this about Oregon, they got resources. They got as much resources as anybody in the country. Okay? They're going to be able to throw around money with the best of them. Right? And that is staying power. I put players plus resources equals staying power. I probably should have done resources plus players equals staying power, because now it really starts with the resources, especially in high school recruiting. But if they continue to acquire this type of player, this is a team that is definitely going to break out when you see these guys develop and get on the field. Like two positions where Oregon has taken, and they've been here, they've been good, and they've taken it, or at least they are slated to take it to great, where even we've already seen them improve under Dan Lanning already. Secondary, defensive line are two position groups that certainly stand out. Like the secondary, when it comes from a recruiting standpoint in the past 2 years, you're throwing out names like Peyton Woodyard, Trey McNutt, Dakota Fields, Aaron Flowers, Naeem Offord, Sione Lelawa. I didn't pronounce that right. I tried that so many times before this, but hey, you get what I'm trying to say. Dorian Brew, Brandon Finney, like even if half of those guys pan out, you're going to be fine. You're going to continue to take this thing up the ladder, because the secondary has been the problem the last 2 years and why they've bowed out. You look at what Michael Penix Jr. in Washington were able to do really in both meetings last year. And then you look at this year, what Ohio State was able to do with their explosive plays, certainly down the field. I didn't even mention Dylan Thieneman, who is a significant upgrade over someone like Kobe Savage. I didn't mention Theron Johnson as well, that comes in at the corner position. Like the secondary, from where the secondary was in like 2022 and 2023 and where they're going to be in like 2025, that is a big, significant jump. And then you look at the defensive line. You look at Mateo, Amari Washington, Blake Purchase, Elijah Rushing, Aiden Breland, Jericho Johnson, Zadavian Sims. Like, they're taking the talent. Like, before they would get a couple of these guys, but now they're in a 2-year period, they're getting like 8 or 9 of these guys because they know you're going to get a few that are going to be able to transfer out, maybe a couple of more that may or may not pan out. But you really want, that 2, 3, maybe 4 of these guys that you're going to be able to develop and turn into all-conference players. They are certainly able to do that. Now, there is no player more important on a football field than the quarterback. Now, they mentioned this on the ESPN broadcast of the Rose Bowl. Dillon Gabriel played 5 years of football. And, UCF and Oklahoma, we all know the story. Following that 5th year, he had a UFA NFL draft grade. We knew what we were getting from Dillon Gabriel. Oregon fans knew what they were getting from Dillon Gabriel this season, and he still was a Heisman finalist, and he still led them to 2 significant wins this season. But I think the ceiling of Oregon football, I talked about Dan Lanning's going to continue to get this program to rise. They're going to continue to grow. Their culture is going to continue to develop. I think a big reason for that is what's going to be coming up here at the quarterback position. I think the ceiling of Dante Moore raises the ceiling of the Oregon program. I just think his arm talent, his athleticism, just his entire body of work. Remember how highly he was rated. He was like a top 5 quarterback in his class with the likes of Arch Manning, with the likes of Nico Imaliava, right? And then you combine him in this offense. I think this was so huge for him to come in and sit and learn this offense. So now when he becomes a starting quarterback, he already has that year of knowledge. He already has that year of seasoning, sitting behind and learning from an experienced quarterback like Dillon Gabriel. I think is going to give him a leg up when it comes to first-year starting quarterbacks that we've seen, like the Dylan Raiolas, where maybe their numbers aren't as gaudy as maybe Dante Moore's numbers will be. It's also probably because Dante Moore's going to be playing with some better talent and some better guys to throw to than those aforementioned guys that I just talked about. I think Dante Moore possibly has more arm talent than any quarterback of the Dan Lanning era. Yes, that includes 2 Heisman finalists. Yes, that includes the current starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos in Bo Nix, certainly as well. I think I think Dante gives the Oregon Ducks a 2 or possibly 3-year window to be able to take it home all the way and get this thing done. Folks in Duck Country, I know things might seem a little bit bleak. I know the sunset may be on your season, but according to sources, the sun did rise today in Eugene, Oregon. This is a program that is not going anywhere. I know there's maybe some other Big Ten fan bases out there that look at this result and say, same old, but this is a program that is still growing under Dan Lanning. Those are my thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you agree with me and you think the ceiling is going to continue to raise, or do you think this is a plateau? Do you think that, hey, people said that this was the best Oregon team and maybe it won't get better than this? I want to hear all your comments in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.